Sometimes when you wake up in the morning, you feel as though something unseen passed through your life while you were asleep. Something crucial, but not yet identified. As you go about your day, you seem to disappear into thin air. You respond to messages, drink coffee, and smile appropriately, but deep down, you can feel a subtle disconnect. You're perfectly fine. You are not miserable. You are sensing the gentle beckoning of life's second half. Psychological maturity, according to Carl Jung, has nothing to do with chronological age or social pressure. It comes when you awaken. In that peculiar holy instant when your once satisfying things suddenly stop doing so. When positions seem constrained. That moment when achievement leaves you feeling empty. And when you look in the mirror and see a face that used to be familiar but now feels foreign. In Jung's view, this was not a crisis. In his view, it marked the boundary between your trained self and your actual self, a crossing. Beyond childhood and trauma recovery, his view of human development encompassed all stages of life. He envisioned maturity as a huge, uncharted territory where genuine change could at last start. Jung turned his attention inward and ahead to myths, symbols, and the living unconscious, in contrast to Freud's retrograde focus on origin wounds. He depicted the mind's architecture not as a rigid framework, but as an inwardly spiraling adventure in which the ego is merely the starting point. Age isn't the only factor that determines how life progresses. He also thinks that depth matters. The sportsman, the fighter, the politician, and the individual soul. These aren't responsibilities to fulfill, but rather phases of personal growth that sportsmen can't get enough of. Reputation and power. The goals of the warrior are dominion, power, and triumph. Responsibility and legacy are lessons learned by the statesman. At last, the spirit looks for significance outside of appearances, outside of ego, and outside of time. Now listen up. Jung had a warning. Stages cannot be skipped. A vital fire is contained in each of them. Every one of them exposes you, unveils your true self, and destroys your illusions. Athletes need to cool down. The fighter is doomed to fail. The statesman needs to give up power. Then, and only then, will the spirit arise, not as a means of evasion, but as a culmination of everything that has transpired. Perfect psychological maturity does not exist. Completeness is it. This is the unassuming power of someone who has faced their many selves and made the conscious decision to embrace each one. In this piece, Jung lays out the stories, patterns, and symbolic thresholds that he thought were necessary for our personal growth. Keep this in mind as you go through the steps that follow. Becoming a new person is not the point of the journey. The essence of it is paying homage to an ancestor deep within you who has endured every fall is a time of loss. Sound, what Jung referred to as the athletic stage of development, is more than just a period of physical maturation. It reflects the early stages of self-actualization. At this point in our lives, we're trying to figure out who we are by asking other people. The body becomes a stage, the gaze of others our spotlight, and the fragile scaffolding of identity begins to be formed through what can be seen, touched, and validated when we measure our worth by appearance, achievement, and approval. At this point, everything is happening in the outside world. Although we seldom acknowledge it, there is a shiver of insecurity that accompanies our still becoming selves. Something we're scared to ask lies beneath all the pretty selfies, the need to be popular, and the fixation on appearances. Do I need this mask to feel complete? It is not from a place of hubris that the ego first forms. It originates in a place of vulnerability, in the mind of a young child who learns that being noticed is preferable to being ignored, that attractiveness attracts admiration, and that physical strength shields one from criticism. Thus, we shape our identities, not out of integrity, but rather out of the need to stay alive. Envision a lone adolescent boy standing quietly before a mirror, removing his shirt to take stock of his physique. He has an abnormally small chest and skinny arms. He clenches his jaw, yanks at his flesh, and tenses his muscles. He compares and shrinks inside as he scrolls through pictures of online influences. Subsequently, he shares an edited photo of himself smiling artificially. Next, it waits, refreshes, and waits some more. Nothing happens overnight. In his mind, it's irrelevant, he tells himself. Yet a part of him is in pain. He doesn't know who he is without other people's approval, which makes him insecure, not because he's vain. This young lad has no idea that he should look within rather than at a screen for the reflection he desires. During his athletic career, he has experienced the athlete stage, in which one's physical form communicates with one's innermost being while one's ego makes its presence known. Despite its demonization, Jung maintained that the ego is essential. It is the initial repository for one's identity, the pot from which full maturity may sprout. However, if we are unable to break free of, the ego becomes inflexible as it clings to outward validation, cutting us off from our true selves. When executed well, the athlete stage teaches us to be fully present in our bodies, to move with strength, and to have confidence in our abilities regardless of how well we do. There is more to movement, dance, and sports than meets the eye. These rites symbolize being fully present. Intentional movement allows us to tune out distractions, tune into our bodies, and get to know ourselves better in the quiet after a run, the stillness before a race, or any other kind of challenging physical activity. Feeling out of breath after a swim, that feeling of pure joy that fades as soon as your gaze leaves the mirror. Here, in these holy fissures, the ego gives way to reality. However, if this phase lasts too long, it poses a threat. Addiction to image, intoxication by the mirror, and the belief that one's worth is solely determined by one's outward appearance or accomplishments leads to a loss of connection with one's inner self and others. A person's emotional depth, level of competitiveness, and capacity for profound empathy are all negatively impacted when they never progress beyond the athlete stage. They could possibly pretend to be vulnerable, seek admiration, and secretly crumble when you're alone. They constructed a temple for the ego, but neglected to furnish its inner sanctuary. Realizing the body for what it is, a vessel, not a billboard, is essential to growing beyond the athlete mentality. We should view our shortcomings not as defects to be fixed, but as opportunities to learn more about who we are. Self-compassion, not symmetry, is the material from which self-consciousness is fashioned. Adolescence teaches us that the pain of not belonging on the outside can actually be a call to belong on the inside, deep inside. That behind our desire for admiration lies a deep yearning to be truly understood. Jung emphasized the precariousness of an identity shaped solely by external comparisons. Asking questions about our identity rather than our appearance marks the beginning of true maturity. Respecting the body as an integral component of one's identity is not the same as rejecting it. Impulse, feeling, and vitality conveyed through a messenger. Adolescence is a time when we're given the ego to shape, not worship. We are not meant to let it imprison us, but we will grow out of it. The next level for athletes is not something to be ashamed of, but rather a prism through which to view ourselves, an integral part of our never-ending quest for completeness. Plus, our bodies will let us know when it's time to go if we pay attention. When power without meaning is meaningless, when physical attractiveness without character starts to wane, when standing ovation isn't enough. The next stage starts to murmur at that point, subtly more subdued. This is the warrior's voice, rising not to win over the world, but to confront his or her own inner demons. Soundtrack, if we learned how to. When we learn to be secure in who we are better able to face the challenges of the warrior stage. At this very place, the ego that was molded by mirrors is now being burned to ash. The call to forge one's identity in motion through striving, falling, rebuilding, and rising again is the warrior stage. Now is the time to embrace becoming, not as a concept, but as a real-life obstacle. Instead of wondering who you are when you wake up, you focus on what you're prepared to do. The seed of accountability is planted in that inquiry. This won't cut it anymore. For all to see, You need to be dependable now. In the face of opposition and reality, you must hold fast to the dream you had as a young person and ride it out into the adult wind. Not everyone can handle that much weight, even those who mean well. Not because they lack strength, but because they secretly wish someone else could take it on their behalf. Jung theorized that even in adults, there is a remnant of their childhood, a voice that cries out for acceptance, validation, and freedom from harm. In failing to recognize that child, we run the danger of allowing it to subtly direct our adult lives. Those who talk about their dreams but freeze up when challenged display this trait. In individuals who are blessed with ease but never develop bravery. When it comes to people who expect love but are unable to give it, these qualities are not bad. They are remnants of an earlier version of oneself that believes life owes us something just because we desire it. Yet willpower is insufficient to change the world. It reacts to our creations, our breakthroughs, and the challenges we take on when others are afraid to. Watching. Imagine a young man with a racing heart who is standing backstage, clutching a battered resume. He majored in art. A part of him always thought he'd be famous by now. Though he never dreamed of accepting the position, he has just walked 20 blocks in battered shoes to get there. He is far from the stage he had imagined. His dreams no longer include the sound of applause. A fleeting sense of shame washes over him. After that, a change occurs. Although unappealing, he recalls that this job is a stepping stone, a choice, and a way to maintain his financial stability. As he keeps on writing, practicing, and moving forward without feeling entitled to anything. He transforms into a warrior at that very moment. I don't think he won anything, but he kept going even when the going got tough. The warrior stage revolves around this point. Action without praise, perseverance without assurances, and praise without praise. It happens when you realize that nobody or nothing can give you value. You must find your own value. Your level of dedication will be reflected here. Relationships also tend to mature during this time. You start to explore beyond mere physical allure. You seek common ground, compatibility, and values that are meaningful to you. Although these two do necessitate effort, it is unrealistic to expect a companion to do more than just walk by their side as a warrior. And to do this, one must be humble. How can I change into someone I would love to be with? It's a call to stop blaming other people and start being responsible for your own happiness. At this point, we often face a quiet grief. The heartache of long-cherished delusions fading away. Having faith that one's identity is unchangeable, that love is simple, and that success comes quickly. These are the ones that, as summer's fading leaves, make way for something more genuine. At this point in life, according to Jung, the ego collides with life. Idealism gives way to integrity, and the realities of adulthood temper the wildest childhood dreams. Discipline, not the end of dreams, is here. And there are plenty of times when the fighter just wants to give up, when the hurt feels personal, when it seems like there's no point in continuing, and when joy is poisoned by comparison. There is no indication of failure here. They are the driving force behind the divine essence. Those are the times when you see love manifested as discipline. The ultimate act of devotion is to consistently show up for your dreams, your partner, and your values. Ambition is not the only thing that matters at this stage. Determination is also a key component. The warrior needs to figure out which fights are worthwhile and which are just ego trips. Staying focused is powerful. Saying no to temptations, quick fixes, and false personas that offer convenience at the expense of integrity is powerful. Purpose. Maturity is formed in this way through both movement and restraint. And when the fighter stays humble and perseveres for a long enough time, something significant occurs. While success is possible, the arrival of clarity is even more crucial. You start to realize that the real prize at this level was never the money, the title, or the approval. It was the person you evolved into as a result. The one who is capable of accepting defeat with grace. Everyone who has ever worked hard without getting any reward should be honored. That person is now characterized not by surface-level accomplishments or aspirations from adolescence, but by inner strength, perseverance, and honesty. After enduring intense danger, a warrior learns to focus inward as well as on the battlefield. At noon, the sun will set. Consistency has replaced aggression. A newfound wisdom to safeguard has replaced an insatiable hunger to prove. As we look over the horizon, the next level patiently awaits. Rather than to construct, to serve. Rather than to dominate, strive to make a difference. Here the warrior turns into a caretaker. After that, on the path to mental health maturity, it was the young man who made the declaration. Music, the spark that once pushed us outward, starts to flare up inside at some point in life, and it's not necessarily a sign of getting older, but rather of a subtle turning. The soul murmurs a more subdued question after years of trying, competing, creating, and becoming. What am I capable of giving rather than what am I capable of accomplishing? Here we are at the statement stage's threshold. Its entrance is subtle, sometimes confused for restlessness, in contrast to the previous phase's noise and urgency, emptiness or dissatisfaction. But that's not the same as not having it. This is a turning point. Once preoccupied with one's own needs, one's inner compass is beginning to shift its focus to those of the greater good, to love, to leaving a legacy, to something more permanent than fame or wealth. Here we are at the peak of the mind, as Jung put it. There are no long shadows cast by it. Instead, it shines straight into the soul. The fact that our worth is no longer demonstrated by conquest, but by expression is both humbling and beautiful revealed by it. By means of linking up, during this phase, something more fundamental and ancient takes its place, and the ego that fought so hard to be born gradually weakens. Having empathy means knowing what it's like to be on the other side of a difficult situation, not just having superficial sympathy that makes you feel better from a distance. You start to see people for who they really are, not as rivals or tools, but as fellow pilgrims, each bearing their own invisible burden. At the point when the fighter was thinking about blows, the statement stage is worried about closeness, about the unseen imprints we make on other people's spirits rather than merely their bios. However, there's been some sacrifice to get here. A midlife reckoning is the turning point that many people experience at this time, suddenly realizing that maybe we've been clinging to the wrong wall as we climb the ladder. It usually starts with an anonymous discuss. One morning, a man who has dedicated his entire life to climbing the corporate ladder finds himself sitting on the edge of his bed, perplexed as to why he feels so empty. In a spacious house, his credibility is unshakable. However, his household's laughter has become less frequent. His interactions with his kids come across as staged. Even though it's dead, his marriage is still alive. First time he wonders, if I disappeared tomorrow, would it matter? To the people he's supposed to be bound to as much as to the company. There has been no failure crisis. This profound existential crisis indicates a yearning for meaning and purpose beyond fleeting material success. Meaning is being sought after, at the statement level, where we face a more fundamental reality that, as Jung suggested, what matters most is not the length of time people remember us, but the quality of the things we contributed while we were alive. That's what separates having an impact and truly connecting with someone. We may not all have the power to heal illnesses or pen groundbreaking novels, but we all have the ability to be a positive influence in the lives of people we meet by simply being there for them, offering advice, and showing love. At this point, the individual and the universal converge, and we become aware that we are not separate entities, but rather links in a web of interdependence. The quality of the energy that passes through us determines whether it makes a positive impact on the world or goes unnoticed. At this symbolic turning point, the masculine and feminine aspects of one's personality begin to gently merge, symbolizing a reunion on a psychological level. Men who were once compelled to demonstrate their power may now appreciate the virtue of gentleness. Women who were previously obligated to cater to the needs of others may now reassert their independence. In Jung's view, the unconscious mind begins to develop in the second part of life, allows us to reclaim qualities we abandoned when we were younger, rather than seeing them as setbacks. Past selves, dormant for survival's sake, resurface to aid in our service. A mother launching a nonprofit or a seasoned executive taking up painting are both quite common occurrences. These deeds are serious. They express the spirit's desire to be heard again. Rather than success, they speak of essence. Still, there are many who fight against this change. They never move past the warrior stage, stubbornly holding on to ambition even after it loses its luster. Concerned about quitting the race would make you unimportant. Nevertheless, they fail to recognize that genuine significance is not linked to rapidity, but to thoroughness. People are more impacted by a mentor who takes the time to listen than by a boss who is always on the go. The value of an apologetic parent is greater than that of a lecturer. Furthermore, when one's hard edges are tempered by love, they become a conduit for a power greater than themselves. What we leave behind is not our legacy in this sense. What we pass on to the next generation through the people we've raised, mentored, or inspired. An individual recounted how, when she was younger, she sought approval from others by striving for perfection in her work. She thought her value was determined by how much she could accomplish. She didn't fully grasp the significance of presence until she took on the role of caregiver for her aging mother. It went unapplauded. Oh, great, no one bothered to watch. But it was in the stillness of eating, washing, and just sitting that she discovered who she really was. It was sacred, but not overly so or spectacular. Her statement remained unspoken, but deeply imprinted in the heart of someone else. Becoming one is the ultimate goal of the statement stage, not merely making declarations. Every action, no matter how insignificant, reflects the reality of your transformation when your life becomes a message in and of itself. You come to understand that your worth was never based on your accomplishments, but on your ability to connect with others, show care, and make a difference as you progress through this stage. This marks the start of reaching one's full spiritual potential. At this point, love can be experienced without condition or proof it is enough. Plus, immediately beyond this brilliant chapter after the sun has set, there is still more sky to see. Nope, just a surrender, not the end. That is, the stillness that comes with finishing rather than retreating. A light emerges from the shadows of life. A more profound insight comes along with it. That the last thing to do is cling, but to release gracefully. Here we enter the next stage, the spirit, as the soul makes its last descent and the sun sets for the last time. As the sun gradually sets below the horizon, a profound stillness settles into one's spirit as the music fades away. This is the sound of someone having arrived, not of nothingness. A sacred turning follows a life of building, striving, loving, and releasing. The spirit stage begins when we return our attention inward rather than outward. It is not because physical strength declines or the world around us becomes less vibrant. Rather, something everlasting, something that has always been there, is stirring beneath it all. At this point in time, the soul is not motivated by vanity or a desire to be noticed. Rather, it starts to recall. It no longer considers itself to be merely a parent, a title, or a person moving through the ages. Something bigger, more subtle, and more eternal has always included it. Carl Jung framed this phase not as a final stage, but as a journey back to one's true identity, one's innermost origin, and the eternal fire that lies beneath all transient manifestations. The ultimate goal of life is not to accumulate more, but to let go. It is not to shout more, but to pay closer attention to the voice that has been murmuring the whole time. Changing careers isn't always easy. I refuse to let go of my ego. It longs to be etched in history, too. Interested in seeing the plot develop a bit further. Now that we've moved on from doing to being, this stage is all about being, while being itself begs for submission. The most difficult part of this emotional journey so far has been letting go of the many identities we've relied on for security and purpose. We let our responsibilities droop like autumn leaves. Worried are the fingers that once forged mighty kingdoms. Our once proud names don't resound with the same weight anymore. However, a radiant form starts to emerge in their stead. Just being alive fills one with a subtle sense of wonder. We will not be forgotten. We will be going back. Refusing this comeback will cause you pain. It is a way to awaken, to embrace it. Nature would not bestow such a long lifespan on us if it were doing so for nothing, according to Jung, and there is wisdom in the process of aging, a spiritual crystallization that is impossible to achieve while one is young. This view flips the script on the dread of becoming older. It transforms from a gradual deterioration into a holy compression, a purifying of essence when viewed in this light. At the spiritual level, one's issues from before start to appear unusually far away. Initially, this may cause some discomfort. What we battled so fiercely for in the past no longer seems important. I don't consider this a setback. This is the soul letting go of its old, useless self. The aging mind, like a tree losing its leaves in winter, must let go of its attachments in order to blossom into something more everlasting. Envision an elderly man slumped over a worn bookcase in a dimly lit room, with sunlight streaming in through sheer curtains. Nothing rattles on his walls, and his time stands still now. Once upon a time, he was a man whose every movement carried meaning. He was also a father of 4, a husband, and a teacher. Now, though, he spends his afternoons thinking about the significance of what he accomplished rather than the things he created. He looks down at a candle's flame instead of a calendar and wonders what's really important. The passion of youth, the ferocity of battle, and the pain and beauty of love are all things he can recall. Not because of remorse, but because of the enormity of it all, he breaks down in tears. Here, in the quiet, he starts to perceive his life not as a series of incidents, but as a continuous spiritual movement. What lies ahead is just the continuation of his inherent potential, so he is no longer afraid of it. The spirit stage is all about transcending the physical while still being a part of it. Even if the body fails, the self grows. Reaching out to the collective unconscious, the unseen foundational network, is the last step in the individuation process. In the depths of our individual existences, we start to feel like we were always a part of something bigger, that our ups and downs are just pieces of a bigger picture. These days, I see death more as a welcome home than a final chapter. Paradoxically, we find completeness in embracing the transience of all things. Prior years of discord between one's persona and their shadow, between one's ambitions and their love, and between oneself and others have now come together. From a spiritual perspective, it's all just one big story. There was zero wastage. There was no issue. The whole thing. On the very last day, the peaceful gifts of this stage are lost if we fight against this passage, demand to be relevant, cling to youth, or beg the world not to forget us. Although our physical bodies age, our spirits never really do. We're just caught in this illusion of immortality. Those who don't reflect on their lives in their latter years run the risk of becoming bitter or hopeless, as Jung cautioned. Instead of rejoicing in the revelation of who they really are, they lament the demise of their roles. Therefore, being on the spirit stage is both an honor and a duty. The invitation to let go, find peace with one's own mortality, and see the divine in every conclusion. How well we let go when life starts to release us is a better indicator of psychological maturity than how well we do in life overall. When you reach this point in your life, you realize that you aren't just climbing a ladder to a better life. You're actually spiraling inward, seeking truth, and ultimately merging with the universe. Since it is no longer concerned with proving anything, this stage's wisdom shines through. It is what it is. No longer is the ego the master. It is the soul. There is no. Now that we know that our eternal selves cannot be erased, we no longer fear being forgotten. In addition to the tangible things we accomplish, What truly matters is the awareness we transmit, the subtle change we brought about in people, the knowledge we imparted through our words and silence, and the impact we had on those around us. Consequently, we are not on the brink of death, but of awakening in the spirit stage. Even though the outside world is getting quieter, the inner world is starting to sing. At last, Jung's remarks resonate the most in this context. True, dreams of those who look beyond. Rises the one who gazes within. Even though the sun is going down, the light inside has only just started to come up. Music. At some point, usually quietly and without fanfare, we stop looking for ourselves in the reflection of the world and start seeing ourselves in the silence we fled. According to Jung, coming to terms with our true selves, the ones hiding behind all the facades, the struggles, and the phases of our identities, is the true mark of psychological maturity, not reaching a final destination. It is the understanding that each stage of our lives, as self-assured youth, ambitious achiever, caring parent, and seeker of spirit, was an integral part of our evolving soul and not an independent existence. No, we didn't outgrow them so we could throw them away. Rather, we evolved into a more mature and subdued version of them. At each turn, a lesson was imprinted, not in memory, but in very being. Furthermore, we start to experience being as we detach from the whirlwind of becoming. Not at rest, but rather present, not in a position, but in the capacity of a resonance nevertheless. As if rising from the very soil we've always trod, the truth we've been seeking starts to reveal itself to us. This is the one piece of wisdom that will last. There was never a time when you were broken, behind, or lost. You were maturing into the ability to compassionately observe yourself as you unfolded, to live each moment with awe, to journey through time seeking meaning rather than simply seeking it. The most significant journey you can embark upon is the one that leads within. The reason it gets you home is more important than the fact that it leads to answers. Furthermore, this house is not constructed of bricks, names, or achievements. What makes it tick is being present, having a healthy soul, and knowing deep down that no matter what, you are enough. At its core, maturity isn't about experience or knowledge. It all comes down to your ability to hear, both internally and externally, as well as to the sacred stillness that undergirds it all. Therefore, if you sense the pain of change, the easing of longings, or the murmur that something within you is changing today, listen to it. This signifies not a decline, but rather an arrival. This is just the beginning of the story's last chapter. Here is where the plot begins to take flight. When one sense of self emerges undefined, where your essence takes center stage, where it stays even when words fade. Rather than showing us how to run away from life, Jung showed us how to dive headfirst into it and walk it awake. As you reach the end of this chapter of your life, may you always keep in mind that the light within you will not go out. I extend an invitation to you, if even a single word here touched you deeply, if this message moved you, to share your thoughts in the space provided. Has the presence of that one soul ever made you feel at home? Or are you still on the holy road leading you to your true self? Even if it's unfinished, your story has the potential to be someone else's guiding light, the sign they were seeking but didn't realize they had. And if you or someone you care about is secretly fighting the delusion that love is always painful, that giving up control is necessary for true connection, or that they don't deserve peace, then you should listen to them. Give them a copy of this video, a hand. Let me connect with those who are in need of a reminder that true love does not necessitate our diminution. There is no need to give one's soul up for genuine connection. Plus, the bond we develop with our own self-knowledge is the most important one we'll ever have. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell before you leave. In this realm, we delve into the depths of things, discovering the subconscious, the intricate web of the mind, and the ways in which each relationship mirrors our own growth. Leave a comment below if you have a topic, question, or injury that you would like us to address in upcoming videos. You're the reason this place is alive. We value and greatly appreciate your opinion. I want to express my gratitude for your presence, not only in this video, but also in your inner work, in the sacred effort of rediscovering your true identity. Keep this in mind at all times. When the one is right in front of you, your spirit will know, not by terror, but by tranquility. However, until then, make the relationship you cultivate within yourself your most intimate. You have that right there, a base. Home is where it's at. All things real originate from that state of completeness.